Hi everyone, I'm Jackie, and today in this video, I will be covering the new August 2025 questions from the College Board Question Bank. These are specifically the questions they released for boundaries, and you want to know these in order to get a perfect score on your standard English conventions. And in addition to my August 2025 reading writing SAT predictions, make sure you know these just in case. Okay, so let's see. So first up, we have in 2021, Mexican biologist Martha Lydia Macias Rubalcaba led a review of the scientific literature related to the endophytic fungi that live inside a host plant. Okay, so first I can see that we have a parenthesis, so I definitely need to close it. And then I have to see how would I close it. Let's check the clause that comes after. So here we have by researching 120 endophytic fungi produced compounds, she found that their phototoxicity can make them viable alternatives to chemical herbicides for controlling weeds. Okay, so I can see that we have two complete sentences. I need to close my parentheses and start a new sentence. So therefore, it must be option A. So remember, whenever you're separating two independent clauses, independent with independent, we need a period, a semicolon, or a comma plus fanboy to do so. And just to show, these would be wrong because this would be a comma splice. A comma splice is when we separate two independent clauses with a comma. This would be a run-on. For this to be correct, it would have to have a comma here, which it does not. So this would also be a run-on, and this is also a run-on. There's no punctuation separating the two independent clauses. Okay, amazing. Oh, next. And what I like to do when I'm doing the English questions on SATA, I do a quick scan of the answer choices just to get a feel on what we're dealing with. In this case, I know immediately I'm dealing with apostrophes. So here it says, in a recent analysis of lyrical trends in 350,000 songs, researchers cite increases in certain measures, such as the ratio of choruses to verses. As evidence, music lyrics are becoming more repetitive. For instance, from 1970 to 2020, rocks and rap's chorus to verses ratios trended similarly, with each genre's data indicating that relative to the number of unique verses, the number of repeated choruses in song release. Okay, so this is showing possession or ownership over the chorus to verse ratio trends. So if I think about it, if you're from the Latin languages, which I think some of my followers are because I'm based in Europe, um, here, what we can do to determine this would say chorus to verse ratio of rock. That makes sense, right? Chorus to verse ratio of rock. So whenever you have the of attached to it, that's showing the possession needed, and I need an apostrophe s if it's English. And the same would be true, chorus quotes for chorus to verse ratio of rep. So I know for sure, since I'm showing this possession and ownership, that I need to have two apostrophes for both of them. And therefore, it must be B. We need the possession. A doesn't have the possession at all. This misses one, and this also lacks an S. Okay, so with apostrophes, if you're not sure, what I like to do is see if it makes sense when you attach of whatever's in question here, in this case, the rap and rock, and see if it makes sense. Okay, amazing. Continuing our journey. Okay, quick scan of the answer choices. I see that all the choices are longer, right? Like the previous two are quite short, only 2 to 3 words. Here I have a whole sentence. So I know before I even read that I'm dealing with modifiers. And with modifiers, we always must place the subject immediately after the comma here. So here it says, supported by biochemical analyses of over 2,000 skeletons from the Middle Ages. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what's supported by biochemical analyses of over 2,000 skeletons? Well, probably vegetables are not supported by biochemical analyses of over 2,000 skeletons. Early medieval rulers' diets, this is referring to diets. I don't think diets are supported by biochemical analysis. The primary components are not supported by biochemical analyses of over 2,000 skeletons. Oh, you know what is supported by biochemical analyses? Findings are supported. And that makes absolute sense to put it directly after the comma. So whatever is being mentioned here in the open introductory modifying phrase, the noun being referred to has to be placed directly after that comma. This is modifiers in action. Okay, continuing our journey. So here it looks like I'm dealing with either which or a quick scan. Probably dashes. Okay, so let's see. As a behavioral economist, Katie Milkman of the University of Pennsylvania recognizes that people sometimes make irrational economic decisions. Yes, Milkman's research can thus address anomalies that neoclassical economic models assume that people are consistently measured cannot explain. Okay, so here it seems like it's trying to explain what these neoclassical economic models are. I also see that there's a dash here. If I have a dash here in the passage and I'm using the passage to explain some extra information, I need to have a dash appear previously. So looking at the answer choices, what makes sense? Option A would make sense, right? Because it would be that neoclassical economic models, which assume that people are consistently rational decision makers, cannot explain. It must be A. And just to prove that, if I were to eliminate this from the answer choice, so from here to here, then the sentence would make sense, right? That neoclassical economic models cannot explain. Okay, so this is just showing the non-essential information use of dashes, which by the way, two dashes is equal to two commas for non-essential information. Okay, continuing our journey, classic. So quick scan, I see that I'm definitely dealing with boundaries and I will need to determine if there's two independent clauses or not. Let's do that. So recent analysis of 32532 Ethereus. Oh, look, an outer solar system object orbiting the sun between Jupiter and Saturn. So not necessary. Has determined its color to be gray, suggesting an icy composition. Such interpretations are ultimately speculative. Okay, that could be a standalone sentence. Such interpretations are ultimately speculative. I have a subject, a verb, complete thought. So let me see what comes after. The object's gray coloration may be an incidental effect of radiation, solar wind, or collisions with other objects rather than evidence of its physical makeup. Okay, so I have two independent clauses. So for sure, when we have two independent clauses, I need to separate with either a period, a semicolon, or a comma plus fanboy. So scanning the answer choices, I can 1 comma, wrong, this one or this one, 2 commas, also incorrect. So I'm between B and C. So now I have to determine where the though goes. And the though, it's like, okay, let me see what clause I'm contrasting with. And when I did the first sentence read through where I said recent analysis of 32532 Therius has determined its color to be gray, suggesting an icy composition. Such interpretations, it seems to be the interpretation that it's an icy composition. So this contrast is referring to this first clause. And therefore, that's how I know for sure that it must be option B. And for these ones, like if you have the transition word that comes at the end, it would be the same to put it at the beginning of the sentence to see if it flows even smoother For example, though such interpretations are ultimately speculative, it also makes sense. I see it's a smooth flow from the first sentence and therefore must be our answer. Continuing the journey. Okay, next, the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, HHI, a commonly used measure of competition between companies in a particular market. So here, just extra information, ranges from a score of 0 to 10,000 points, compared with that of a highly concentrated market, that is a market controlled by fewer companies. Okay, again, extra information. So I forgot to mention quick scan. I know I'm dealing with modifiers, um, but something that jumped out to me too when I was reading, it's modifiers with comparisons. And I haven't seen one of these in a while, so this is interesting. Compared with that of, this always indicates that something is being compared. What's being compared? That of a highly concentrated market. Okay, it can't be market because it's comparing something of the concentrated market. The HHI score, probably. When, we can't start a comparison with when. A less concentrated market, you see these are basically comparing the same thing. That doesn't make sense. So it's B. The HHI score of a less concentrated market will be much lower. So to show, this is basically saying compared with like the HHI score of a highly concentrated market, the HHI score of a less concentrated market. So we see I have the two proper comparisons, which is HHI score to HHI score. Okay, amazing. But so if you see this on the exam, they have been testing it on recent SATs. If you see that of, it's definitely testing comparisons with modifiers. So check what's being compared in the sentence to help you answer it. Amazing. Continuing our journey. Okay, quick scan. I know I'm dealing with verbs, and I can answer this one without even looking at the passage. Why? Well, let me tell you. Okay, this is plural. This is singular. This is also singular. Singular. And this, if you've been following me along for a while, you know I call this the 3 versus 1 split. And in this case, it can never be the three singular options. It will be the unique plural option for sure. However, since I like to be meticulous and go over everything, I'll double check what the subject is. So here, so shrewd an observer is Shonagon, a lady in waiting to Empress Teishi, that her book's musings on the 10th century Japanese courtly life fascinate readers 1,000 years later. What fascinates readers? The musings. And therefore, it must agree with our plural verb, fascinate. This happens a lot. I would say almost every single SAT exam I see the 3 versus 1 split. You saw how I answered that without even reading. You could do the same. Okay, here. Quick scan, definitely dealing with boundaries. I think I know the answer, but let's take a look. Philosopher Peter Kivy was a leading figure in musical aesthetics. First of all, that's a complete sentence. Complete sentence slash complete independent clause. Let's continue. And then, as evidenced by his belief that instead of evoking particular emotions, such as sadness or joy, compositions elicit a listener's emotional response to the structure and artistry of the music itself, Kiwi's approach to the study of music was decidedly formalist. Yes, a longer sentence, but a sentence nonetheless. So I have two independent clauses. And again, the only way to separate two independent clauses is with a period, a semicolon, or a comma plus fanboy. And therefore, our answer must be D. Amazing. Continuing our journey. Looks like it's probably, well, two independent clauses, boundaries. Okay, so here. Featuring works by the photographers Lola Alvarez Bravo and Else Eva Nylander Simon, the 2021 exhibition, The New Woman Behind the Camera, set out to provide a wide ranging overview of photography by women in the 1920s through the 1950s. Okay. So, first of all, that's a long sentence, but from here to here, it's definitely an independent clause. And then let's see if the second sentence is given the collection's breadth of more than 120 photos, its efforts were largely successful. I have a subject completed. I have a subject, I have a verb, I have a complete thought. It is also independent. And like I said in the previous question, we could either separate with a period, a semicolon, or comma plus fanboy. Look what I have here, a comma plus fanboy. This is a run-on. This creates a fragment, but we could say it's a run-on, and this would be a comma splice. Okay, amazing. Continuing our journey. So likely dealing with apostrophes. So let's take a look. To fully describe the motion of an object requires knowing each of 5 variables that characterize objects' movements. Okay, so here it's something about movement. So movement of objects. That would show possession, right? I have movement of objects. Knowing each of the variables that characterize the movement of objects. So I know for sure that this needs to have a apostrophe. So, and we are talking about objects plural, and the appropriate way to do that is with one apostrophe. This would be if it was singular, so that's incorrect. And we need the apostrophe, so this can't be correct. And this doesn't make any sense, so it must be B. And that's our option. Okay, amazing. Oh my goodness, look at this. I scanned the answers. I know I'm dealing with verbs. This is plural. This one's plural. This one's plural. And this one's singular. So I know without even doing anything, it's D. However, for those of you that follow along and want to know what the subject is, let's take a look. Legal scholars James Melton and Tom Ginberg's analysis of judicial independence and its growth over decades identifies 6 constitutional features that enhance such independence, including judicial tenure and selection procedure. Okay, so this is classic X of Y, and I know it's agreeing with singular analysis. Okay, amazing. Continuing our journey. Okay, so here I'm dealing with pronouns. So I'm going to be looking for what the subject of the sentence is. Let's see. The present-day city of Dushanbe, Tajikistan, sorry for the pronunciation, was for years the capital of the Tajik Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic, one of many nominally autonomous republics within the Soviet Union. Like blank, pure autonomous Soviet Socialist republics, the Tajik Republic was established along ethno-linguistic lines. Most of the republic's residents spoke Persian. Okay, so what's the subject here in the passage? It's the Tajik Republic, and that is singular, and it must be its. And friendly reminder, this would be it is, doesn't make sense. This would be they are, the contraction, and that would be for plural. Okay, so must be, agree with the singular subject, the Tajik Republic. Amazing, continuing. Okay. The Austronesian language family includes Tagalog, Malagasy, and some 1,200 other languages throughout the Pacific, making it one of the largest families in the world and of keen interest to linguist Diane Mossam of the University of Toronto. Okay. So this is name inclusion. For these ones, um, we have to see if it's going to be essential information. Sorry. Essential would be no commas. And non-essential, the ones with when I'm dealing with a title or name placement, a colon is not going to be the answer. And one commas we can also always eliminate. Um, so here, when I read it, I just know it's already C. But just to show, like, it would be of keen interest to linguist, because if we remove Diane Masson from option A, like families in the world of keen interest to linguist of University of Toronto. Grammatically, that doesn't make sense. So I know that I need to include the name Diane Masson for it to make sense. If it said a linguist, maybe it would be grammatically okay, but it doesn't. And therefore, I need to include Diane Masson for it to be correct. Okay, continuing. Okay, here looks like we're dealing with boundaries again. Let's take a look. During the decades-long movement to codify the rights of Latinos in the US, certain events were pivotal. The founding of social justice group of the League of United Latin American Citizens in 1929. And then Katzenbach versus Morgan Court decision in 1966, which affirmed the rights of Latino voters in another such event. Okay, so here, first of all, what jumps out is that there's a colon. And then it's basically listing off of like the certain events that were pivotal. So we have the founding of the social justice group of the League of United Latin Nation Citizens in 1921. Um, this seems to me like for one, this is the first item in the list. So that definitely needs to be included. And from here, so it wouldn't be this one, like I wouldn't start a new sentence with for one, because this is the first one. Like if we put for one at the beginning, it needs to make sense. For one, the founding of the Social Justice League of the United Latin American Citizens in 1929, and then Kotzkenberg versus Martin Court decision in 1966, which affirmed is another such event. Yes, this is also a complete sentence. We can see is another such event. So I have to separate the two independent clauses with a period. These would both just grammatically incorrect, but comma splices. Okay, amazing. Continuing, looks like we have yet another boundaries. Okay, so let's see. The pedagogy of the Suzuki method is rooted in several central tenets. Okay, that could be complete. Let's see. And then if we start with developed by, so developed by Japanese violinist Shinzeki Suzuki, who sought to parallel the linguistic learning environment. The method emphasizes playing instruments from a very young age and teaches students as young as 3 to play a simple classical piece such as March in G. Okay, Suzuki. Um, so I can see there's two independent clauses here, and then followed from here, subject verb and complete thought. And the only way to separate that is with a period. This is a run-on, also a run-on / comma splice. And option D is also a comma splice. Okay, so whenever we separate two independent clauses, I know for sure I have to use a period, a semicolon, or comma plus fanboy. Okay, quick scan. This is super long. I know for sure I'm dealing with modifiers. Okay, and remember with modifiers, the subject that is being referred to in the open introductory modifying phrase needs to be placed directly after the comma. So let's see. Forming extensive networks via mycorrhizal association, that is a symbiotic relationship between plants and fungi. So like this isn't really necessary. What forms extensive networks via mycorrhizal association? Well, let's see. No, we never have like it. What forms it forms extensive networks? That's not very descriptive. The transport forms extensive networks. I don't think so. Nutrients can form extensive networks. I don't think so. So pine trees and the fungus Trichoma stocki. Oh, that makes sense. The pine trees are forming the extensive networks. Yes, amazing. So therefore, it must be option D. So remember, with modifiers, the noun that is being referred to in the open introductory modifying phrase must be placed directly after the comma, or in this case, after the dashes. Okay. Continuing our journey. Okay. Verbs. So here, unique among animal species, humans use our vocal apparatuses primarily for two separate communicative purposes, to talk and to sing. The question of what cross-cultural traits distinguish these distinct modes, and secondarily, what pressures led humans to develop them in the first place. Animates have animating, neuropsychologist Danielle Sandler's 24 studies, signatures of speech and song, universal links despite cultural diversity. Okay, so I'm seeing basically the question of what calls cross-cultural states, these distinguished modes. This is really what I'm checking out. So what what animates her? Well, I have to agree with the subject in question. The question animates. So it must be the question animates neuropsychologist Danielle Sandler's 2024 study. The question, it can't be have. This is also incorrect. Um, it this is for plurals, and our subject is singular, the question. And then animating, that also cannot be correct because that is not grammatically correct. Like I can't just put connect the gerund form or the participle phrase to this clause with the finite verb. Makes no sense. And therefore animates. Okay. And finally, last question of boundaries in the question bank. So the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, tracks comparative priceless data for its 38 member countries. For instance, in July 2021, a hypothetical basket of goods priced at 100 US dollars in the United States would have cost 62 USD and 110 USD in fellow OECD nations. Um, Chile and Luxembourg, respectively. Okay, so in this case, we're also still dealing with similar to the names and titles that we saw previously with Diane something. So I'm listing off a name, in this case, the name of the country. It's essential information, so there is no pause, and therefore I know for sure it must be D. No punctuation. It's not listing off anything or providing an explanation. So we can eliminate that one. And just whenever, also like when you have Chile and Luxembourg respectively with the list, you don't have comma respectively in it. So we can eliminate. It's not separating two independent clauses. So I cannot use a semicolon. And then it can't be option A because we wouldn't put a comma in between two countries. And therefore 50. And just, the majority of questions on the SAT that are in relation to nouns and titles, this is the second one we've seen in this set. They don't require any punctuation around them because they are essential to the sentence. So that can be a little helpful tip if you're struggling with these on the exam, that most likely it's the choice with no punctuation. But names and titles, for the most part, 97% of cases don't require any punctuation around them. Okay, so these were the new questions released by College Board on August 13th, 2025. And like I said, if you're taking the exam this August 2025, this Saturday, the 23rd of August, I would definitely feel comfortable with these as well as my August exam predictions. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll keep releasing new content for you so you guys can ace the SAT. Like, rate, and subscribe if you like this video. You've made it all the way to the end. And if you have any comments, you can leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.